Hello there, good afternoon. Flooding has caused widespread travel disruption across Scotland this morning. It comes after a Met Office amber warning for heavy rain in Dumfries and Galloway and the borders. The Scottish Environment Protection Agency has issued flood warnings in both central and southern areas. Our transport correspondent David Henderson has more.
Oh, he's broken down.
What a place to break down. A car and lorry stuck on the M74 motorway near Biggar this morning as heavy rain and deep standing water brought this vital transport artery to near standstill. Other cars inch along, their journeys proving hazardous.
Oh, nightmare.
Right, Jack, guys, go on.
It's been a night and day of rain, and in Dumfries this morning, hurried flood defences were being put in place as local residents guard against the prospect of the River Nith bursting its banks. A flood warning's been issued for this town by the environment body SEPA and 30 more across southern and central Scotland as police, councils and other bodies prepare for trouble.
We are aware of reports on social media, we're aware of reports from our own staff and residents with concerns about properties. As we speak, no properties have been flooded, but mitigation measures have taken place in terms of sandbags, in terms of roads operatives carrying out repairs and such like, to try as best as possible to make sure that flooding doesn't take place.
There's been heavy rain across much of Scotland. This, the scene at Bowling Station to the west of Glasgow, where localised flooding closed the line and brought some rail services to a standstill. The knock-on impact, long queues at Edinburgh's bus station as travellers are forced to change their plans. Near Loch Lomond, the River Endrick had burst its banks, making driving conditions a real challenge for many.
We're keeping a particularly close eye on communities in the Dumfries and Galloway and the borders area. Communities like Dumfries, Hoyk, Peebles, Newton Stewart, but we're also monitoring communities further north into the Clyde Valley and the Kelvin Valley and the Water of Leith. So really quite a wide swathe of southern and central Scotland is at risk of flooding over the next few hours.
There may be worse to come, but near the Clyde, abandoned cars already sit in 3 feet of water, with only a jogger, it seems, able to make it through. David Henderson reporting Scotland.
Well, our reporter Stephen Gordon joins us now from Dumfries by the River Nith. And Stephen, what's it like there now?
Well, it stopped raining, and that is the improvement in conditions that we were expecting with the amber weather warning for rain running out at midday. But the rain, when it was here, was absolutely torrential, and it caused some real problems. All round here there were roads that were closed, and those that were open, there was so much surface water that it was making life really difficult for motorists. The concern now is what comes next. You can see the River Nith beside me. The water level's really high and continuing to rise. The expectation is that this afternoon they will just simply go up further. So the road to the side of the river, it is completely closed, and we saw this morning that people were putting in place flood barriers to stop the water getting into their homes and to their businesses. Now the local resilience team, they said that as things stand there are no properties flooded in the area, but there are areas that they are concerned about and keeping an eye on. As far as this river is concerned, the peak is expected to be late afternoon, early evening, so it's simply something that people are keeping a really close eye on.
Stephen, thank you. A police officer was taken to hospital after his patrol car collided with another vehicle and crashed into a wall on the M8 in Glasgow shortly before 8 a.m. this morning. The car was on its way to an emergency call when it was involved in the crash at junction 19 near the city centre. The driver of the police car was taken by ambulance to Glasgow Royal Infirmary for treatment for minor injuries. People across the sporting world have been paying tribute to arguably the world's greatest footballer, Pelé, who died yesterday at the age of 82. The Brazilian wowed fans the world over, but a trip to Scotland more than 50 years ago remains an important part of one town's history. Ian McInnes has the story.
He was one of the greats, without a doubt. The Brazilian put a smile on the face of football fans across the world. He was welcomed here in Scotland to Hampden in 1966 for a so-called friendly match ahead of the World Cup. But a trip to Troon in advance of the match caused quite a stir.
There was probably a buzz went round about the town that Brazil were up at Portland Park, the wonderful Pelé, etc.
Portland Park, the home of Troon FC, played host to the superstar in quite different times.
That hut that you see Pelé coming out of I'm led to believe was an old railway carriage, which we used as dressing rooms. And it was wooden benches and various things like that with an old tea urn in the corner of each dressing room type of thing. It would have been a huge turnaround from playing at the likes of the Maracana to come to Portland Park. But once you cross that white line, the Maracana and Portland Park wouldn't really be that much different.
Fresh from his training at Troon and a few miles away at Hampden Park, it was honours even between Scotland and Pele's Brazil. But the great man's legacy lives on.
They talk about Messi, and Messi is a magician, an absolute magician. But there's only one Pele. And I think, as well as being a wonderful footballer, he was a really, really nice man.
Ian O'Connor there, ending that report from Ian McInnes. Well, now time to take a look at the weather forecast, and here's Shalene Smart.
Hello. Lots of scenes like this one across Scotland this afternoon. Parts of southern Scotland have recorded 70 mils of rainfall since 6 p.m. last night. We still have a yellow warning of heavy rain across central and southern parts, due to expire shortly, but we'll continue to see issues through this afternoon with lots of surface water and spray. As the persistent rain pools away, it's followed by scattered showers, heavy at times, some hail in the mix, some winteriness on the hills, and they'll be driven in on fresh to strong westerly winds touching gale force along the west coast, especially as we head towards evening. Those winds really ramping up, gusts of 60 to 70 miles an hour, perhaps more, in this yellow warning zone, combined with sleet and snow showers feeding in from the north, snow even to low levels for a time. Across southern Scotland, thickening cloud will bring some patchy rain overnight. It will be cold, temperatures close to freezing, if not below, so a widespread frost and a risk of ice, a yellow warning of ice from the Met Office across northern parts. That's valid until 11 a.m. tomorrow. So a cold start. We'll continue to see sleet and snow showers across the Highlands and the northeast. Some patchy rain moving into southern Scotland, perhaps into central parts later in the day as well. It will be cold, though not as windy as it was today. But then we head towards evening, and around the bells we'll see some heavy rain moving into southern Scotland. The potential for winteriness for central parts too, and it's staying unsettled into New Year's Day with outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow tracking northwards across the country. That's the forecast.
And that's all from us for now. Reporting Scotland is back just after 6:30 tonight. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye for now.
Good evening. Flooding has caused widespread travel disruption across Scotland. It comes after a Met Office amber warning for heavy rain in Dumfries and Galloway and the Borders this morning. This afternoon, the River Nith in Dumfries burst its banks, and there is now a severe flood warning in place. Our transport correspondent David Henderson has more.
It's rained and poured, and this is the result. Flooding in Dumfries as the River Nith burst its banks. It leaves streets underwater and locals counting the cost.
It's flooded the basements and it's now going into the ground floor flats, but so far the water's come up through all the drains and I'm getting flooded through the drains.
An official flood warning had been issued for this town, one of 31 across Scotland, and there's little that defends against water on this scale.
At the moment, it's blocked from the outside, and I just double-checked with the seller. It's not water gone in there yet, but the problem is coming from the under the building. So it doesn't matter how much we block it from here. The problem is inside the building.
Oh, he's broken down.
And what a place for it to happen, the fast lane of a motorway. Near Abington this morning, flooding brought traffic on the M74 close to a standstill, with drivers facing lengthy delays.
Oh, nightmare.
There's been widespread disruption on the railways too. This the scene at Bowling Station west of Glasgow, a river where the track should be. The knock-on impact, long queues at Edinburgh bus station, with travellers scrambling to get home. Near Loch Lomond, the River Endrick had burst its banks, making driving a challenge for many. In Dunfermline, this car was afloat, drifting down the street, out of control. While across town, a rescue team had to check this vehicle to make sure no one was trapped inside. So while the rain's moved on, problems remain.
Around this time of year, we have to consider three main factors really in terms of flooding. One is the rain, the other is snow melt, and then the third factor is the sea level. So during a storm like this, you can get if you get a combination of high tides and the surge in sea level, which is caused by the storm, then you can get coastal flooding too.
So that grim cocktail's left its mark in West Dunbartonshire too, with cars left stuck in several feet of water, and only a jogger, it seems, able to make it through.
And David joins us now. David, those flood warnings are still in place.
Yes, Laura, and a fresh warning's been issued tonight, a severe warning for the centre of Dumfries after the River Nith broke its banks. There's flooding too in a few streets in outlying villages, and it seems there are still big delays for anyone driving on the M74 near Abington. Police in that region say people should avoid travel unless it's vital. Elsewhere, it's not so bad now, but it's clear there's still a huge amount of surface water on roads across the country. That's draining slowly, so official advice is to drive with great care. And tonight, Network Rail warns that flood water is still disrupting services through the Central Belt, in Ayrshire and in Fife. The Argyll line through Glasgow is now closed, and they say the West Coast main line is also closed due to a landslip. Laura.
OK, David, many thanks indeed. Two NHS health boards have issued an urgent appeal for staff who aren't working but are available to come into work. NHS Grampians say they're facing extreme levels of pressure across their healthcare system due to the number of acutely ill patients arriving at hospital. NHS Borders say they're facing high levels of staff sickness. Both health boards have asked all staff who are not currently rostered but available to contact managers as soon as possible. Meanwhile, doctors at Scotland's biggest emergency department say they have pleaded with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde to declare a major incident amid grave concerns over patient safety. The BBC understands staff working in A&E at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital say the department is overwhelmed. The Health Board says it is taking action to support staff. Aileen Clark reports.
A series of messages have been passed to the BBC, showing yesterday here at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital a request by accident and emergency consultants to declare a major incident was declined by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. Now, the messages describe that in the course of the day, the consultants saw every space in the A&E department occupied by patients waiting for a bed in the hospital. At times, there was no resuscitation beds available, and there was an 8-hour delay for ambulances to offload their patients at the hospital, so ambulances queuing outside. Now, the BBC understands that consultants had what were described as grave concerns over patient safety, and they wanted a major incident to be declared. So that would free up effectively additional resources to be targeted at the accident and emergency department to ease the situation. Well, the Health Board have told us in a statement that they do have a policy which would allow them to declare a major incident, and they're closely monitoring the safety of patients and departments and keeping that under review. And they admit that its services, like they say the health service throughout Scotland, is at the moment under major pressure, indeed facing extreme demand, they say, including significant COVID, flu and norovirus cases. Now, they say they're doing a number of things to help the pressure on A&E departments, including diverting staff from other duties to work in A&E. And they repeated that well-worn message we've been hearing a lot of, appealing to the public not to go to an A&E department unless it's really urgent or life-threatening. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
An urban farm in Edinburgh is set to close just 3 years after it was saved from collapse. Gorgie Farm, which gives volunteering opportunities to disadvantaged young people, will close on the 7th of February due to rising costs and a lack of funding. Now, people across the sporting world have been paying tribute to Pelé, who died yesterday at the age of 82. The Brazilian wowed fans the world over, but a trip to Scotland more than 50 years ago remains an important part of one town's history. Before a friendly against Scotland at Hampden in 1966, the Brazil side trained at Rugby Park in Kilmarnock and at Troon Football Club's ground.
That hut that you see Pelé coming out of I'm led to believe was an old railway carriage, which we used as dressing rooms. It would have been a huge turnaround from playing at the likes of the Maracana. But once you cross that white line, the Maracana and Portland Park wouldn't really be that much different.
Right, time now for the all-important weather forecast with Judith.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening to you. Lots of pictures like this coming in from our weather watchers, and I'm glad to say the disruptive rains we saw earlier are over for southern Scotland. Then it's all eyes to the north for a wind warning. A swathe of severe gales will cross northern Scotland during tonight. It'll be a short-lived affair, but you'll see gusts possibly in excess of 70 miles per hour. And then we have a yellow Met Office warning for ice across the northern half of Scotland as well, lasting into tomorrow morning. So as far as this evening's concerned, still some bits and pieces of showers rain in the south, but that will clear away. And we have this band of rain, sleet and snow pushing in across northern Scotland. That moves away as well. It will be very windy here, of course, to be replaced by wintry showers. Now, further south, we'll see a band of rain just grazing the border area, and it won't be particularly heavy. Temperature-wise, we'll start to see the temperatures falling to around about freezing, if not below, so widespread frost and that ice risk. That rain first thing in the south does clear away. We hang on to a lot of cloud across southern Scotland though. In the north there'll be a number of wintry showers, but lighter winds tomorrow and staying cold. That's your forecast.
Thank you very much indeed, Judith. And that's Reporting Scotland. We'll be back with an update at 10:25, but for the moment, have a good evening. Bye-bye. Good evening. A severe flood warning is in place after the River Nith in Dumfries burst its banks. Across Scotland, flooding has caused widespread travel disruption. Our transport correspondent David Henderson has more.
It's rained and poured, and this is the result. Flooding in Dumfries as the River Nith burst its banks. It leaves streets underwater and locals counting the cost.
It's flooded the basements and it's now going into the ground floor flats, but so far the water's come up through all the drains and I'm getting flooded through the drains.
Oh, he's broken down.
And what a place for it to happen, the fast lane of a motorway. Near Abington this morning, flooding brought traffic on the M74 close to a standstill, with drivers facing lengthy delays. There's been widespread disruption on the railways too. This the scene at Bowling Station west of Glasgow, a river where the track should be. In Dunfermline, this car was afloat, drifting down the street, out of control. While across town, a rescue team had to check this vehicle to make sure no one was trapped inside. So while the rains moved on, problems remain.
Around this time of year, we have to consider three main factors really in terms of flooding. One is the rain, the other is snow melt, and then the third factor is the sea level. So during a storm like this, you can get if you get a combination of high tides and the surge in sea level which is caused by the storm, then you can get coastal flooding too.
So that grim cocktail's left its mark in West Dunbartonshire too, with cars left stuck in several feet of water, and only a jogger, it seems, able to make it through. David Henderson, Reporting Scotland.
NHS Borders and NHS Grampian have appealed for staff who are on leave but available to come into work. It comes as doctors at Scotland's biggest emergency department say they've pleaded with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde to declare a major incident. Aileen Clark reports.
A series of messages have been passed to the BBC showing yesterday here at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital a request by accident and emergency consultants to declare a major incident was declined by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. Now the messages describe that in the course of the day the consultants saw every space in the A&E department occupied by patients waiting for a bed in the hospital. At times there was no resuscitation beds available, and there was an 8-hour delay for ambulances to offload their patients at the hospital, so ambulances queuing outside. And they admit that its services, like they say the health service throughout Scotland, is at the moment under major pressure, indeed facing extreme demand, they say, including significant COVID, flu and norovirus cases. Now they say they're doing a number of things to help the pressure on A&E departments, including diverting staff from other duties to to work in A&E. And they repeated that well-worn message we've been hearing a lot of, appealing to the public not to go to an A&E department unless it's really urgent or life-threatening. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Now the weather with Judith.
Thank you very much. A very good evening to you. That really intense, disruptive rain has now cleared from southern Scotland, I'm glad to say, and now it's all about the wind for warnings tonight. We have a widespread severe gale warning across northern Scotland tonight, a swathe of severe gales crossing the country, but it will be short-lived, and also an ice warning too as the cold air digs in. So as we head into tomorrow morning, the winds will have eased right down. It'll be a largely dry start, a chilly start with a widespread frost and that risk of ice. Some wintry showers across northern Scotland that will eventually ease. Any early rain in the south will pull away. We're left with just some residual cloud and maybe some bits and pieces of rain along the border area, and feeling pretty cold across the board. So as we head into the evening time, as we head towards the bells, a dry, clear start, a quiet start before we see some rain pushing into southern Scotland. That leaves us with quite a wet start to the year across the very far south. Maybe that rain just pushing into the central lowlands. It'll be light and patchy. Still some doubt though, but it'll be cold and frosty and dry for more northern parts of the country, and those temperatures really struggling to get above freezing. And across the Northern Isles as well, there'll be mainly light winds with cold temperatures and clear skies as well. So that's your forecast, and all the very best for the new year from me.
And that's Reporting Scotland from everyone on the Late Team. Good night.